One.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is a continuation of our FY22 operating budget deliberations and work. This is the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. I know Councilmember Friedson will be joining us shortly, and it's good to see you, Councilmember Katz. We have 19 items today, but of those 19 items, 9 are consent, so those should go quickly, which is why we need to get started and get our work done. I want to thank all the analysts who have prepared these packets, and I also want to thank the county executive's staff who have worked collaboratively with our analysts to prepare all this information for us. We're going to begin with our community engagement cluster, and I know we have Ms. Carolyn Chen who has prepared this packet. In my list of expected attendees, we have Ms. Kasiri, who's a Deputy Chief Administrative Officer of the Offices of the County Executive, Mr. Bande, who's a Director of the East County Regional Services Center, Mr. Hartman, Director of Bethesda Chevy Chase Regional Services Center, Ms. Matthews, Director of County Regional Services Centers, Ms. Montero Diaz, Director of Mid-County Regional Services Center, Mr. Rodriguez, who is the Director of the Silver Spring Regional Services Center, and in the list, we also have Ms. Diane Vu, who's the Director of the Office of Community Partnerships, Ms. Finkelstein, who is the Executive Director of the Commission for Women, and Corey Orlovsky, Acting Manager of the Office of Management and Budget. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Chan to go through the particular items. What we want to do is hear what is the total recommendation from the County Executive, and then if there are any particular decision points that we need to address, and then we'll open it up for any questions that we might have. Ms. Chen.
Thank you. So Ms. Navarro, I actually have a couple of slides to frame the conversation, which I'll share right now. I'll just run through to show the context of the first 3 items today, a little bit discussion on our strategic vision discussion, and then we'll go into each agenda item and the recommended budget. Right. So today at the GO committee, we'll be discussing the community engagement cluster, the public information office, the core services, and also MC311. So overarching understanding of these 3 divisions is not that they are the same or that they're even under the same umbrella, but that their function is to communicate and respond to residents. Last year's pandemic created a critical unmet immediate need to communicate life-saving information to residents. And we needed to use a multicultural and multilingual approach and address a 24/7 news cycle. The Community Engagement Cluster with Community Partnerships, Commission for Women, Charles Gilchrist Center, and the Volunteer Center, Regional Services Directors, and PIO Core and MC311 rose to that challenge beautifully last year. I also wanted to note that it was a county-wide effort in order to communicate and respond to residents this quickly. It required strategic coordination among multiple departments, forced breakdown of the government silo structure of departments. The success was based on all of these departments and their urgency and desire to execute this important information, and the diverse staff and language, culture, zip code, and lifespan that these entities span. This includes Council PIO, the Business Advancement Team, the Cable, Television Communications, Emergency Management, Homeland Security, Public Health, Health and Human Services, and the Technology and Enterprise Business Services. A lot going on. This was in response to committee members wanting to see that this is a much more larger strategic effort to communicate and respond to residents. So just very quickly on what our current model for public information and communications is, so that we're all on the same page. We have traditionally had a message, which then is shifted to a press release and a graphic, then translated and then distributed. So when there is a need for more messages, we typically, as you'll see in this recommended budget and during last year, we will add people with laptops, we'll add money in order to increase the distribution of the message. That is the traditional model that we're working in. The recommendations you'll see forth today is within this model of making sure we increase distribution to residents. The question going forward is, what is the strategic vision of the county's public information and communication? So in the future, we will not only have increased messages, we will have increased cultures and languages to address. And so the question we'd want to answer in our work sessions and working groups over the next year is, how can we do this by increasing efficiency and productivity? How can we do it so it's less time, less cost, and that we're leveraging new technology? And finally, using this context and background really to frame our discussion today, what you'll see in the community engagement cluster, as well as the public information and MC3-in-1 budget in this committee, is that there's been department investments made, significant investments made in personnel and technology to meet these short-term critical unmet needs. One of the recommendations outside of approving these investments is to build upon the OLO report that was conducted on MC3-in-1 and identify best practices in highly responsive government communications pre and post-pandemic. And finally, to begin cross-functional working group this summer with all of these entities, as well as the second slide from before, to start developing that strategic vision that will get us to our next model. And with that, I will stop sharing and we can enter into the first item of reviewing the operating budget for a community engagement cluster.
Perfect. And it's my understanding that the recommendation from the executive is $6,048,203, which is 42.7% above the FY21. And there is a considerable addition of FTEs, but this is, if I understand correctly, has to do with the establishment of a permanent translation unit and also increasing capacity for multilingual, multicultural communications. Is that right, Ms. Chen? Do I have that right?
Yes, it's a translations unit as well as in placemaking funds for White Oak and White Flint Pike District. And this is, as we frame the discussion, more of meeting the critical short-term need. We will continually need to expand and revise this model going forward to meet future needs.
Thank you so much, and it's good to see everybody here. So I want to make a couple of observations. I think that we've all in different times throughout this pandemic have made the comment that in so many ways this pandemic has forced us to meet the moment. A lot of the things that we have had to stand up very quickly, a lot of the strategies that we had to stand up very quickly were strategies that we had really examined and discussed and we have begun to implement. I think the pandemic just sort of turbocharged a lot of these efforts, and they also forced us to work collaboratively with a lot of grassroots community folks to enhance the success of those strategies. And now I think we have really awesome frameworks and great templates that we can now pretty much incorporate in how we conduct, business. The issue of communications and engagement, outreach, engagement, communication was just so front and center during this pandemic, right? I mean, we recognized that literally in March of last year. And everybody just came together. I know that in terms of communicating with our immigrant community, very quickly, Councilman Rodwell and I had a conversation, and it was kind of like, all right, we need to try to stand up some models here, and spoke to the executive, and immediately we were able to stand something up. And Mr. Hartman has been instrumental in leading that charge on the executive side. We did the same on the council side. And then that also was a natural progression to the Latino-centric COVID-19 initiative, Por Nuestra Salud y Bienestar, and also our African American Health Program initiative. Now, the reason why I mention all of this is because I think we do need to take a step back to understand why these efforts are so critical, and why, as Ms. Chen was just discussing, why we need to really take it to the next level. A couple of just things that I've been thinking about a lot. Montgomery County Public Schools, 73% students of color. Montgomery College, 78% students of color. We are waiting on the census results, obviously, but Park and Planning has a really great presentation that I've asked our council president and vice president to schedule. They made this presentation to the redistricting committee regarding just sort of the demographic changes across the decades. And it's what we know. And I say that to frame this particular item in the sense that, we need to really acknowledge who we are, right? Who are we? Like, what is our duty in terms of providing, services, support, responses to our constituents? Now, who are these constituents? And it is startling to think that Montgomery County Public Schools, if the student population is 72% of color, now, obviously, this is an indicator of who we are. Same thing with Montgomery College, right? These institutions, in my opinion, are kind of like a microcosm of the trends and also who we are in the community. And so, to me, this particular item begins to formally establish a best practice in how we outreach, engage, and communicate with our residents. No longer should we be talking about these items as sort of nice to have, right? Or like, oh, it's the right thing to do. We've passed that sort of framing, in my opinion, decades ago. We need to now really, truly acknowledge that this is the way we conduct business. And why? Well, because if we don't do that, not only do we hit the mark on what we are here to do, but like we saw during the pandemic, it can have life and death consequences. Our Black community had, the highest mortality rates. We saw the zip codes. We knew where folks were. The Latino community disproportionately had the highest number of cases. We saw the zip codes. We knew where they were. And that is why being proactive, but also responsive is so important. And so I am thrilled to see the proposal for the translation and interpretation unit. I have recommended this forever because MCPS, when I was a member of the board, I was, instrumental in getting that situated at MCPS as a matter of practice. So I'm really excited. And I know Mr. Hudson heard me loud and clear because I kept saying that. I'm so excited that the executive has made a decision to establish this. This is critical. This is really critical. We can no longer be in a situation where we're literally, in our offices doing, translating things that need to go to the general public. We should have something that is centralized and that is also culturally appropriate. So I'm really excited about this direction, where we're headed, and want to personally thank all of you because you've had to all play like a real pivotal role in responding to a pandemic. Like I always say, without a manual, with no like real, no, it's just kind of like step up and do it on the spot. And you've done extraordinary work. I believe that's why we are where we are right now in terms of our numbers. And that is no small feat. So I just, literally take my hat off to each and every one of you for stepping up, for doing everything you could, for stepping out of your comfort zone many times to respond in a significant way. And all of you know that I'm passionate about all of this because it's just been my life's work. And I just really feel good that we're, I think, getting to a point where I think we're getting to that fidelity point where we can say, yes, of course we value our diversity, but it's not just a buzz phrase. We really do step up and, and serve all of our residents. That's a very exciting thing. And I've talked a lot. So I don't know, Councilmember Katz, if you have any comments, and then if anybody wants to, make any comments regarding the recommendation.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. You certainly said it well. I want to thank Ms. Chen and everyone else who worked on this packet. Obviously, when you started out by saying we have 19 areas of discussion today, and we're not going to be able to spend as much time, even though I think 10 of them are quicker
Yes.
consent items. But I do think it's extremely necessary that we especially talk about the first item, the item we're talking about now. I do agree with staff suggestions for the approval of the county executive's suggested submitted budget. I also agree that we should have the joint meetings this summer with between government operations and health and human service for the various work session topics. And I'm sure as we go through the discussions of those work session topics, we'll think of a few more work session topics that we need as well. But I do want to echo what you've said. I'm not going to repeat what you said, but I do want to echo what you've said, that it is imperative that we communicate. We can all understand that. But it was because of you and Councilmember Albernaz and others, but certainly because of you two, that we realized that as much as we meant to communicate in the right way, we weren't always communicating so that people knew what we were talking about, what we were communicating about. And that is a huge problem. So I think this is a great step in the right direction. And we're going to have to continue to do more and more and more. And we need to think about all the languages that we need to be talking to people in there so that they too realize that they are a great part of their community, and that we're very, very honored to have them here, so that they need to hear that what a great part of our community they are, and how happy we are. So with that, I know that this is going to be a ongoing conversation, so I certainly am supportive of staff suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Katz. And yes, I think it's important to know for the record that we are going to have subsequent conversations probably in the summer to make sure that we are aligning all of these different approaches and that we're leveraging the resources that we have. I think that we have extraordinary opportunities to do that. And even though we're taking these obviously items separately, there is a lot of this crossover and all these connections that we do need to definitely align. So I think with that, anybody would like to make some comments before we vote? Any additional observations? I believe you all learned the lesson.
I think they realize they should take yes as a good opportunity.
Yeah. I was going to invoke the words of our esteemed former county executive Leggett, that when you know that you've got the votes and you're moving forward, it's best to just not say anything.
Right.
I always remember him saying that. So perhaps that has just continued to be the practice. Okay, so I think with that, without objection, we will approve the county executive's recommendation of $6,048,203, and I'm so thrilled that you will continue to go forward and get going on this work, and can't wait to hear more about it. So with that, thank you, everybody. It's good to see everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, so our next item is Public Information Office. And as I was saying earlier, all of these things are somewhat connected. And so we will be obviously having subsequent conversations about all of that. So with this, let's see, this item, I'm looking at my notes up here. So I think we do have, of course, Mr. Barry Hudson. I believe we have Mr. Roberts also listed here, who is from MC311, Ms. Roper, Director of the Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions Department, and Ms. Jamie Kura from Office of Management and Budget. So let's see, Ms. Chen, can you just give us a brief overview, and then we will ask Mr. Hudson and Ms. Roper if they have any additional comments, as well as Mr. Roberts.
Great. I just want a point of correction is that Ms. Murica is unable to make the meeting today. So Ms.
Okay.
So she's gone, but Crystal's here in her place.
Okay.
Okay, great. So for the Public of Information core, we'll be doing this in two sections. First, on the public information core, which is the public relations and web design and content management part. The recommended budget is increase of about 19%, mainly in the operating costs of the Office of Public Information. This we will need to discuss and approve separately from MC 311. That's what we've been instructed. So if we want, anyone want to, from the PIO core side, comment?
Let me,
there you go.
You just muted yourself, Barry. Barry, you're on mute.
all right, unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
As they said in the old commercial. First, like to thank you for having us here today, and don't want to take up too much time with niceties, but we're pleased to be here today to talk about our budget. In terms of the increases, and I think Ms. Chen kind of reiterated the point of some of the additional resources that are in there. On the PIO core side, there are a couple of positions. We lost a position last year. We've added one in and enhanced that position as a result of that. And there are a lot of things we learned from COVID. And I think Council Member Navarro hit the nail on the head. We learned a lot, but what we don't want to do is not take those learnings and carry them forward. So our budget represents some adjustments there from a staffing perspective. We've enhanced there. And in addition to that, there's also some additional dollars related to that personnel line item that does enhance our budget by a considerable amount of 19%. So it is our hope that this committee will approve that adjustment and carry us forward with it.
All right. Anything else, Ms. Chen, that we need to discuss regarding that particular portion?
No, not on this. We're good on the core. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Katz, any questions regarding this piece?
No, I agree with staff recommendations. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So without objection, we will approve that. Ms. Chen?
Just another point of clarification. I want to check if Councilmember Friedson is on. I
sorry?
assume a 2-0. I saw if Councilmember Friedson is on. Just want to make sure the vote is 2-0 going forward.
Yeah, that's me. I'm on audio only.
Okay, great.
I'm listening. I'm listening in. I'm okay here. Thank you, Madam
Okay.
Chair. I'll let you know. I'm hoping to be on video shortly.
Okay, no problem.
Great. Dr. Thurikas?
Yes, should I take over? We're not going to turn our attention to the MC311 element within the PIO budget. It's traditional in front of GO and for full council to take them as separate activities. So you have in front of you my recommendations for the $4,322,078, which represents a 5.5% increase for the budget of the MC311 Center. It also includes one additional FTE, full-time equivalent resource. My recommendation is simple. Two are structural. One is to have a joint discussion with the HHS committee for some of the reasons that Ms. Chen began to list. We need to have a centralized and organized and a coordinated way of listening to our residents. And Ms. Navarro, you were present for the HHS discussion that included the approval, at least at the HHS level, of a new call center. And from my viewpoint, as simply someone who observes the flow of incoming calls for service, I'm always an advocate of centralizing the intake and then decentralizing the response. Right now, the HHS seems to be saying that the department needs to not only have the responsibility for the response, but also the responsibility for the intake, and that I think gives me some cause to think. So, as a consequence, I'd recommend one that you meet with the HHS committee sometime after the budget is over to begin to organize a more coherent way of how we listen and how we respond to residents, which aligns very much to Ms. Chen's recommendation. Number two, my second proposal is to, in fact, ask the OLO, also the legislative oversight, to do a comprehensive, deep study of how we listen. What are the technologies underlying our listening methodology, how we respond, and also equally important, how we make sure that the executive branch organizations are kept honest and have their feet kept to the fire in terms of delivering. The technical term for that is service level agreements, SLAs, and it's time to review those SLA strategies once again. My third and easiest recommendation is to adopt the executive's recommendation. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Navarro.
Thank you so much, Dr. Torres. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention, I agree with your recommendations. I believe that there was this overarching recommendation from council staff that the committee, for the committee to assign to the Office of Legislative Oversight a report on open government best practices in communication, digital strategy, public affairs, and community outreach to reimagine the next generation model to increase county government responsiveness. And I think that that's folded in there. So I would love for Ms. Chen and Dr. Torres, if you can perhaps put something together that the committee can then directly send over to the Office of Legislative Oversight for consideration. And of course, taking also in, very much all of this guided by the conversation we just had in terms of the very diverse county population, and of course, racial equity, social justice, this whole notion of cultural proficiency, et cetera. It's not an easy task. And again, I feel like everybody has definitely come forward with the best possible solutions, especially through this pandemic. But, it's never too late to begin to rethink and be, super proactive about all of these issues. I have said to my staff time and time again, because they remind me that in 2019, when I was council president, I was very interested in us, being proactive and putting forth all these protocols. And literally once I said, heaven forbid we ever have a national emergency. And now I'm like, I can't believe I said that in 2019 because never knew, of course, that in 2020 we would have a sustained, and here 2021, global real emergency. So I, big believer in the fact that never too late to begin to just put all those plans in place and update them, I guess, is real the key question. Let's see. So anything you'd like to add, Ms. Roper or Mr. Roberts?
I would just like to say that, we did take advantage of some of the resources that we had in place, and as part of our new strategy moving forward, we did conduct a comprehensive business process reengineering to really kind of see where the holdup were associated with the departments, finding out that, it doesn't all stop in 311, that HHS, the two HH call centers were part of the challenges as well. I also just wanted to make sure that I mentioned two things as it relates to our strategy for multi-channels for residents to be able to interface with the county, that we had to find different ways for residents to get information that they needed. And we were able to implement a chat bot. And that chat bot has already has about approximately 38,000 visits in the last 90 days and over 9,000 web chats per week. And, we can talk about what that means, but it really was a way to reduce calls going to humans and to be able to address some of the most pertinent information that people needed to know in order to get the services that they needed. And then the other aspect of that was a virtual agent that we were able to implement. We did all of that in about a week, and it's been highly effective. We want to see more of that And we want to really focus in on having multiple ways for residents to get the information that they need. It was a combined effort with Barry's team and HHS, and we're pleased with it. We know we need to do more work, but we're pleased with it. And I can remember saying a while back that we were going to do a chat bot. And I remember Mrs. Navarro said, okay, a chat bot, okay. But we've done that and we want to expand, and we've got some other departments interested. So, we'll move forward with the technology and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Before I forget, also, I want to make sure that Dr. Torres, Ms. Shannon, Dr. Torres, you mentioned the HHS session on their call center. And I'm a big believer in not working in silos. So I very much, I didn't catch it in time, but very much would like for now on for that to be a HHS item so that everybody can be on the same page. So we're not having these conversations everywhere. Anybody else would like to make comments?
I just wanted to, this is Brian Roberts. I just wanted to mention that the HHS effort is something that we are aware of. And we have set up several work groups. There are 8 of them, probably 6 of them are active with HHS and the Office of Eligibility and Support Services to redesign the processes between our 2 departments. And so it's not just an addition of people, it's a wholesale change of processes. And we hope at the end of that, the customer will have a much better experience and the entire process will take less time. And that'll be a prelude to future implementations of technology. So rather than just spending a lot of money to do the same thing, we're looking to reduce the number of steps that a customer has to go through, reduce the length of time customers have to wait to get the information and the services they need. And it's obviously important across the board. We're doing that with permitting services, we're doing that with OHR, we're doing that with a number of different departments. But of course, right now, with the pandemic in social services and public health, it's extremely important. And so that's why we're spending so much effort there.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Appreciate that. Councilmember Katz, I think you had.
Yeah, everyone has said it well. I did think it should be noted, Council Chair, the committee chair, that yes, you were council president in 2019 and said what would happen if there was a national emergency, and I became president in 2020 and there was a national emergency. So we found out.
It was like a tag team thing.
Yeah. No, I appreciate all that. But I did want to make the note about no silos, and I do agree with you wholeheartedly. When someone has an issue and they want to contact Montgomery County, they don't care what department is going to handle it. They care that it's going to be handled, and that is the most important part of our abilities, our functions. I mean, I know that it's like when I went to the dentist this week and he painstakingly, and I guess that's a good word to say, explained to me what he was going to do. Candidly, I wanted him just to do it. He does a wonderful job, but I wanted him to do it. I didn't need to hear all the technology, everything that was going to happen. And that's the same thing when someone calls us. They want the job done. So I think we are trying our best to do better and better. We have a ways to go, obviously. And I think that this budget will help us get there. And I agree with staff's recommendations on this, as well as the joint conversations and the conversations with the other on the other topics. They're needed. We need to continue them. We need to, as I say constantly, not only do we need to talk about them, we need to fund them so that we can actually do them. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so with that, before we vote, the only thing I will say, since Ms. Roper talked about the chat bot and how I was a little skeptical, I'm still hoping that we will get to the point of that app, so that folks can just very quickly access things on their phone. So that will be the next thing that we should all start working on, since I'm constantly asked about that when we were out there in the community. And I know that we've discussed this before, so we can talk about that in another session after budget as well. All right, so without objection, then we will accept the county executive's recommended request. And by the way, it's good to see you, Crystal. I haven't seen you in a while. All right. All right. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you for everything you've done. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. So now on to, believe it's item 4. Is that right? Or are we on that already? Because we did.
I believe you
Trying to
are
keep
right.
track.
I think Dr.
Yes.
Regas added his in with the others. So
Being very efficient, Dr. Torregas. All right, so for this item, I believe we have Ms. Olson and also Ms. Rodriguez Hernandez that have worked on this particular item. And of course, we have Ms. Ward, who's the director of our Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, Ms. Hawa, who is she's a fiscal and policy analyst for the Office of Management and Budget. And it's good to see you, Mr. Friedson. Councilmember Friedson is appearing on the camera. It's good to see you.
I remember
okay.
him. I remember him.
Let me turn it over to Ms. Olson, but also just, general remarks. Obviously, this is a very exciting item because, we've worked really hard once again, before this was 2019, right before we had 2020 come to give us not only the pandemic, but a renewed reckoning with systemic racism. And it was, pretty amazing that this jurisdiction, this county had begun to do work to put a lot of things in place. And I believe that if there is a measure of success that could be almost anecdotal, the fact that almost everywhere I go in any kind of policy discussion, equity is always mentioned. And that to me is incredible because, when you start seeing culture change, how people talk and the things that they pay attention to, when you start hearing it over and over again, to me is a signal that folks have made a decision that this needs to be front and center. And once again, given who we are, who Montgomery County is in terms of our demographics, this is paramount in everything that we do. So a lot of great work has taken place, a lot of very important, milestones, I think, for the County Council, of course, welcoming Ms. Liz Olson to help us also navigate this issue through our work has been instrumental. And also some of the additions that we've made to not only the legislation, but also to strengthen Ms. Ward's office in order to really, truly be able to implement all of this at fidelity. So I am thrilled. I think, one of the most recent awesome things that happened is that the city of Gaithersburg did adopt a resolution that it was spearheaded by Councilmember Lorianne Sales. And, she reached out to me and we spent almost 2 hours where I went, step by step, sharing with her what we had done and shared all of the materials, everything that we had put out there so that she wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, because that is the beautiful part of this. I did the same thing with King County and they were very generous. And so a lot of it meant that I didn't have to reinvent the wheel when putting this proposal together, and that my colleagues all were able to then add whatever they needed. But that's exciting that City of Gaithersburg has been able to adopt this, and then it is modeled after the legislation that we adopted in 2019. And I hope, anytime I get a call, I'm just super generous with the information, because again, it's very important that different jurisdictions and different municipalities, et cetera, align with the work. That way we're not working in silos. So that is absolutely awesome. And so with that, let me turn it over to Ms. Olson to give us a little bit of an overview of what is in front of us. And then Ms. Ward, in case you have, any additional thoughts, and then we can turn it over for questions from my colleagues. Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Chair Navarro. So the executive's FY22 recommended operating budget for the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice totals $1,001,712, an increase of about $420,000 or 72.3% from the FY21 approved budget. This increase is primarily due to an increase of 4 FTEs, and these positions are aligned with the requirements placed on the office by the county's Racial Equity and Social Justice Act. Key changes in the executive's recommended budget include an increase of about $240,000 for 2 positions that were added mid-year FY21 via supplemental appropriation. And I do have one correction. The packet states that both those positions were program manager positions. However, only one was a program manager and the other was an administrative assistant. There are currently 2 program managers and 1 administrative assistant in the office who all started in FY21. One program manager filled a role previously classified as a community outreach manager position, and that person joined the office in December 2020. A second program manager filled the position that was added mid-year FY21 and started last week. So apologies for that error. The community outreach manager position was reclassified as a program manager position for a decreased cost of about $3,000 to better serve ORESJ's focus on training departments and assisting them with developing policies, programs, and procedures. And the executive's recommended budget also includes an increase of about $182,000 for 2 additional program manager roles for FY22. There's also a decrease of $16,000, which reflects a shift in funding for stipends for the public members of the Racial Equity and Social Justice Advisory Committee, which will be funded by the non-departmental account for boards, committees, and commissions starting in FY 2020. And just to provide a little bit more detail about the 2 additional program manager roles for 2022, one position will be responsible for assisting departments in the use of racial equity budget tools and will research industry best practices to update these tools, as well as support leadership in developing and implementing strategies to advance racial equity. And the second position will work with county departments on data analysis to define programs, outcomes, strategies, and performance measures. And if funded, ORESJ expects to fill these positions by fall of 2021. The office has also provided updates on the implementation of the county's Racial Equity and Social Justice Act, and there's more information about the law included in the packet. The law requires the office to perform an equity assessment to identify policies and practices that must be modified to address racial and social justice disparities. And ORESJ will contract with their vendor to assist departments with utilizing an equity assessment beginning in the fall of 2021. These assessments will inform departmental racial equity and social justice action plans, which are expected to be completed by spring of 2022. ORESJ and the Office of the County Attorney are currently working to revise draft regulations implementing the law and expects to present the regulations to council by the end of this month. And in terms of training, ORESJ began training departmental racial equity leads in September 2020 and has trained 30 leads to date. Each lead has received 40 hours of racial equity training and will receive 72 more hours as they work with their racial equity core teams and develop racial equity action plans. The office will also begin offering 2 virtual racial equity trainings to all county employees beginning in the spring and summer of 2021. And additionally, ORESJ will offer the 2-day Racial Equity Institute Phase 1 training to 45 additional department directors, senior staff, and new racial equity leads in the spring and summer of 2021. ORESJ is also charged with staffing the Racial Equity and Social Justice Advisory Committee, which has met monthly since September 2020. The committee has written letters to Governor Hogan and the county executive regarding racial equity in the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine, and members are currently working to plan events to provide learning experiences regarding racial equity for county residents and officials. So in terms of applying a racial equity lens to budget decisions in the executive's FY22 recommended operating budget, OMB worked with ORESJ to develop a set of budget equity questions for departments, which were included in the program proposal form. Those questions are included in the packet. OMB received a range of responses to these questions, with some departments providing more refined answers than others. Council staff is documenting these responses to establish an official baseline for each department and to track progress over the next year. And ORESJ is currently working with OMB to develop a new budget equity tool with an enhanced set of questions and information to assist departments in drafting more robust racial equity responses in their program proposals for FY23. The new tool will be informed by conversations with other jurisdictions implementing budget equity tools, as well as conversations with council staff. And ORESJ and OMB will then provide training to departments on the new tool once it's finalized. The additional staffing for the office and additional racial equity training mentioned previously will also provide departments with a deeper understanding of how to apply racial equity frameworks to their decision-making. The regulations implementing the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act will also instruct departments to disaggregate their data, which will further facilitate a more robust racial equity analysis. So that concludes the overview, and council staff recommends approval of the FY22 Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice operating budget as recommended by the county executive.
Thank you so much, Ms. Olson. Ms. Ward.
I want to first thank Liz for working with us, and of course, thank the council members for their work on this initiative for, gosh, it feels like 3 or 4 years now. This 1 year feels like a whole 2 years. So yes, the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice is excited about what lays ahead of them. We have over the last year, while we've done a few formal trainings, have done a lot of informal training, and that is going to offices and to senior leadership and presenting basically the framework of what we're doing. So while we seeded what racial equity is and what our expectations are with the community, we did not do a lot of that with our staff. And so we spend a good amount of this year doing that with our staff. And so much like the county council member Navarro said, now there are very few rooms you can go into where people are not talking about the impact of racial equity. We spend much of our time talking to our MLS directors, much of our time even talking to commissions and boards, conducting conversations, facilitating conversations on race, and particularly in the atmosphere we're living in with COVID and the racial injustices that we are dealing with boards, commissions, as well as other rank and file staff. I'm happy to say that we have brought in 2 program managers, one of which just joined us last week on April 27th, Sarah Alvarez. Sarah is a policy analyst and has already started to jump in and started to work on our new budget tool, which Veronica and our Office of Management and Budget is also helping on. We had a very rudimentary tool at the beginning of this budget, which really gave us a baseline of the understanding that that offices had, one of racial equity and how they were implementing racial equity. And we hope that this tool will give us the data and the information that we need so that we are more centered in what we're actually doing and actually getting to a point of closer to the racial equity outcomes that we desire. What else we've done? I want to say that this has been a challenging year, that COVID has presented us with opportunities to be in many rooms and many discussions, whether it's on health equity, as well as economic equity, and how this pandemic and this crisis has landed on people of color in this county in particular. I'm looking forward to bringing on new staff as we have new responsibilities, a few of which we've already started to take up, including giving a racial equity analysis to the supplemental appropriations that come from the executive's office. We've also brought on 2 new members to our Racial Equity and Social Justice Committee, which is barreling ahead with their mandate. Looking forward to bringing those 2 members on. And then, getting our data analysis and getting a more robust budget tool in this next year. I'm looking forward to that work.
Thank you so much for those comments and updates. I was wondering regarding the regulations, can you tell us a little bit about when we can expect that? And are there still some just issues regarding that, like barriers or anything like that?
Sure. So right now we have draft regulations in our Office of a County Attorney, and we are working through the details of those regulations. We have put in very detailed portions, including a community engagement plan, including what you can expect or what we should expect in a racial equity and social justice action plan, what it actually looks like to disaggregate data, what data should be disaggregated. And so we're just going, we are refining what that looks like and what the legality or the legality of some of the details of our regulations. I've found that our regulations are very different from any I've seen all around the country. DC just actually released their regulations on their new REACH Act on April 20th. And I would say that ours are a tad bit more detailed than even theirs are. So I am hopeful that we will be able to get those to you all so that you all can participate in the process of refining them as well by the end of this month.
Awesome. I really appreciate you sharing sort of the process for the budget tool. I must admit that, in some of our conversations thus far, when we ask directors, or even in some of the, I think we've had a few interviews for directors, et cetera, and when that question comes up, inevitably either the response is, well, we have this program, or, well, we're going to work with Ms. Ward. And I think it's very important for department heads, managers, et cetera, to understand that that is not what we're trying to do here, right? It's not about just thinking, well, let me check the box. I'm going to work with Ms. Ward, therefore I'm done with racial equity and social justice. Or, yeah, we have a program that subsidizes the costs of, renting public facilities. That was actually a bill that I introduced like 5 years ago. And therefore we're done, that there has to be an understanding of the baseline and then also where we're headed. So I can't wait, to see how that will be refined and how that will show up during our next budget, process. That's really good to know.
Yeah, what I found in my discussions with chief equity officers in San Antonio, in Alexandria, and Fairfax, and other parts of the country is that oftentimes they are refining their budget tool, quite frankly, every year. I was talking to, like I said, folks in San Antonio and Denver, and they're like they have had 3 budget tools in 3 years in trying to help their directors and their staff refine, one, what racial equity is, right? What it actually looks like in policy and programs and procedures, and then really giving them an opportunity to examine their work in a way where they can actually demonstrate that to us. We're not trying to play gotcha. We want people to be able to give us honest answers so that we can have an honest assessment, and so we can find places to insert a racial equity lens into these policies and procedures. And so I'm expecting that with training, both on the budget equity tool and training in general, that those answers will be more refined in the next budget cycle.
Awesome. All right, I think that's all I had. Any questions from my colleagues or comments? No? Okay, so without objection, we will accept the county executive's recommended budget, and which in this case, it is, pulling up my notes because my iPad went dark. I believe it's $1,712,000, which is an increase of about 72.3, which reflects the additional staffing that is needed in order to provide the service. All right, well, thank you so much, Ms. Olson and Ms. Ward. Really appreciate, as well as Ms. Hawa, for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item in front of us is the Office of County Executive. And for that, I believe Mr. Camacho has prepared a packet for us. And I do see Ms. Kasiri here, as well as Ms. Salem. And with that, let's see, Mr. Camacho, what is the recommendation? And then we'll see if Ms. Kasiri has any additional remarks.
Great, yes. Good afternoon, council members. So the county executive's recommended budget as transmitted in March was $5,641,962 for the Office of the County Executive. I do want to note that the county executive has since sent an amendment that would shift funding from the Office of Intergovernmental Relations to the Office of the County Executive for the administration of a federal real estate services contract. And the GO committee discussed this at the work session last week. So that would change the budget slightly. So As it was transmitted in March, the Office of the County Executive's budget was around $41,745 less than the FY21 approved budget. With that shift, it would now be an increase of $32,655, or really 0.01% difference from the FY21 approved budget. There's also one reduction in FTEs. So in FY21, the county executive's recommended budget for the Office of the County Executive included 33.7 FTEs. Now it is 32.7, which reflects the shifting of the Chief Digital Officer from the Office of the County Executive to the Department of Technology Services. The council enacted this change through Bill 3020 on August 7th, 2020. With regards to other changes, council staff identified two key issues. I already kind of explained one, which is that shift in funding from the Office of Intergovernmental Relations to the Office of the County Executive. But the county executive has also proposed funding for a new director of strategic partnerships. This position would basically focus on coordinating and reviewing executive regulations, be a liaison with the county council, and develop executive positions on testimony on council matters. So really just a liaison between the council and the county executive. So the estimated cost of this position is $179,718. However, the county executive identified turnover savings of $45,512, which results in a request of $134,206. And you can see that in the table on page 2 of the packet. The remainder of the request, the $134,000, the county executive worked to make this addition revenue neutral, and really they worked with OMB to identify other reductions elsewhere in the 22 budget. So OMB determined that a portion of this $159,000, or that a portion of this increase would be funded from a decrease in the community engagement cluster budget through a combination of eliminating a position and also a decrease in annualized personnel costs. I will also note, though, that this Director of Strategic Partnerships was actually introduced as part of Bill 2220 that the council did review but did not take action on. So the council would have to come back to this bill and take action in order to create this position. With that, I will stop there and see if Ms. Kasiri has anything to add.
No, I think you covered everything perfectly. And Ms. Navarro, I just wanted to apologize. Rich Madaleno was scheduled to be here today, but actually he's not at the office. So just, we are here. If you have any questions, we're here to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Kasiri, appreciate it. Councilmember Fitton.
Thank you. So this is a long time conversation. I know we embarked on it last budget year. There was a lot of things going on. Ultimately, there were some questions about how this was going to work. I do appreciate both the interest in trying to address some of the challenges with the communication between the executive branch and the legislative branch, which we all recognize has significant room for improvement, and we all are committed to trying to improve it. That's been exacerbated by working virtually and a global pandemic and all the additional issues that we've had. There were some challenges going in. Certainly any challenge that you had going into this COVID emergency have been exacerbated exponentially. And I think we all can appreciate it and recognize that. And I do appreciate the effort. We had made a significant push to try to make it revenue neutral. I'm not sure exactly how the revenue neutral aspect of this works, because we're eliminating positions and then adding positions to the same, potentially to the same office. But I do appreciate the effort there as well. I just wanted to raise the question about process here and what we're planning on doing. I am personally uncomfortable with us funding a position that we haven't yet approved. I know that we're in a situation where the budget has to pass. When the budget has to pass, we're required by law to do that. But I did just want to get a sense, before we approve this, and perhaps we can't do that today, and perhaps we have to. This may make more sense to be a full council conversation since the legislation to repurpose that position has to take place. But I totally understand the rationale behind this. Totally understand and appreciate the efforts that have gone into it. I just think that we should make a determination for how the council is going to proceed on the bill before we allocate money in the budget for a position that we haven't yet decided to approve. So I just was hoping to get a little clarity on that from a process standpoint and then an understanding of where we are on that. Ms. Kasuri, I'm sorry.
May I, if I, there is no new money. There is a position that will be abolished and other savings. So if you are correct, if Bill 22-20, I believe, if it is not approved, basically there is nothing to be added. The position that is proposed to be abolished, I guess, will not be abolished. And there is no new money here. Maybe
so I'd like to dig into that a little bit, because presumably, we've gotten a lot of rhetoric about this grand restructuring effort and the 100 positions that were going to be identified by this working group that was supposed to happen by this budget, which was delayed from when it was originally going to happen. Now it's going to happen moving forward. If there's been an identification of a position that could be eliminated in the community engagement cluster, I'm not sure, as we're adding dozens and dozens and dozens of positions, many of which are desperately needed, like we've been talking about in this process, why we wouldn't just eliminate that position and do it. I mean, I'm a little confused as to how they're directly linked, where we would keep a position that we've already identified as not needed. And if we aren't going to move forward with this, we're going to keep funding that position, even though we've already identified that it's not needed. It would seem to me that, at one point we've decided that a position is not necessary. That position is eliminated. And then there's a separate question of whether or not this new position should be repurposed and therefore funded in order to provide the liaison work between the council and the county executive. But I have a little bit of trouble understanding how they're directly related. To me, if we want to, the decision point today is whether or not we're going to eliminate the community engagement cluster position you've identified that's not necessary, which would allow us the opportunity to do this position, to include this position, whether we, if we want to fund it and if we approve the bill, then I would get that. But I don't understand not taking up the abolishing of the position first.
So abolishing position, I guess what we are saying is this position, Director of Community Partnership, is at this point for us has more value than the other position that has been vacant. And of course, there are many positions in the government that are currently funded and were kept vacant for a variety of reasons. So that's what we are saying. The Director of Community Partnership is more valuable and important to county executive than the other position at this point. So therefore, we are repurposing, relocating the resources from there to here. If the Director of Strategic Partnership is not approved, the legislation that is in front of you, I think you're going to be hearing it next Tuesday. All I'm saying is there is nothing to I guess abolish, and there's other fundings. There's no other funding that I guess needs to be decided. That's all I'm saying. Maybe
you only want to abolish the position if you're going to get the new position. That's
yeah. Yes. If
what's the overlap between the position that's being abolished and the Director of Strategic Partnerships? Because I thought that the main purpose of this position was to serve as the liaison between the county council and the county executive and executive branch of
Yes, the
government.
main
What's
yes,
the
main-
overlap?
the purpose of this position is liaison. If you're asking why that position was identified in CEC, that was OMB's effort. They went through the system to find a position that possibly is not as much as needed. But so there's the only, I guess, nexus. Is that correct? Maybe OMB can explain how that position was selected, because I wasn't involved with that process. The only thing was I asked them, please.
I'll have some
I think I
follow-up
can clarify
to that.
this very
Does that
easily.
reduce the number to 99 of the 100 vacant positions to abolish that was part of that effort? I mean, I have a little bit of trouble not connecting the dots to the various things that we're doing in the budget. I mean, ultimately, it's one county budget, and we can say it's coming from here, it's coming from there, but ultimately, it's taxpayer money and it's one county budget. So to me, in many cases, it's really just a distinction without a difference. I mean, I appreciate the effort, but if you could just explain the connection, that would be helpful.
So a lot of this is already settled, to be honest, because in the beginning of this session, the CEC component, the council staff made a recommendation to approve the budget as submitted. And the CEC budget as submitted included the reduction, elimination of the identified position, as well as the turnover savings that naturally happen from a couple of long-term high-paid individuals to, new employees. So those savings are already captured in the budget and were already recommended by the SCO committee in the first vote of this session. So regardless of what happens with the CEX position, those actions for the CEC budget were already approved by this committee.
That's what I thought. Okay, so I think we've made the decision to abolish the position. Whether or not adding the funding for this position is, offsets it, and that becomes, a trade is an open question that we haven't quite settled. My perspective, I'll yield colleagues, I've taken enough time here, but I'm not comfortable yet, and I'm not sure that we necessarily have to, although I yield to the chair and Councilmember Katz on their preference, but I'm not sure why we would add to the budget funding for the position until the council has made the decision on the bill. If we make the decision on the bill for that position, then that position ought to be funded in the budget, or else I'm not sure why we're going to approve the bill. If we ultimately decide not to approve the bill, and then we ought not to provide funding for a position that has no purpose, or at least is not maximized to the purpose as it was intended. I'm not sure that
That's my understanding. Yeah, I mean, thank you. I do think that we can come back to this. Ms. Michelson, the bill is scheduled, is it?
It is scheduled for the next legislative day, which is May 18th. And I would suggest that perhaps the committee wants to make a tentative recommendation based on approval of the bill, because we have to do our final wrap up on the budget May 20th. So it is a little bit tight timing wise.
So what I would suggest is that maybe we do a tentative, we make a tentative decision, almost like a straw vote. What I will add is that, at least from my perspective, I think that we have had not the best experience with trying to figure out how to facilitate the best kind of coordination and communication between the executive and the council. And, previous administrations had a different sort of process. And so I know that there has been a lot of conversation about this. And this has been at least explained to me as an attempt to improve that, which I think is significant, because not only have we realized how tough it's been during the pandemic, but there's going to be a lot of real, complicated things moving forward. So I think it is important for the council to have an opportunity to obviously chime in, but given the time constraints, I don't know if it's possible, Ms. Michelson, procedurally, if we take like a straw vote and then depending on, what happens with the bill, either come back or revisit. But I understand what Councilmember Friedson is saying, and it would have been great to kind of choreograph this differently. But I am sensitive to the need that exists thus far. I guess my only question is that so far, I believe Ms. Dale Tibbetts had been sort of, doing that function. Is that going to continue, or is this sort of like the person that would be assigned as a liaison to the council alone, or is this in addition to Mr. Tibbet? What is that going to look like?
Well, this person is going to be the lead main person. In addition to Mr. Tippett, all of us, including me, all the special assistant. But our goal here is to have a single point of contact that clearly be able to communicate, coordinate, respond, be on top of everything that we as executive branch need to be as it relates to county council, and be able to respond to you on a very timely and comprehensive matter. So as far as others, we all going to be involved, but we want to have a highly functioning lead person that can meet both the county council's goals, desires, needs, so as county executive. That is the only goal here.
Thank you, Ms. Castillo. Councilmember Katz.
I'm not on mute. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand this really is a chicken and an egg situation, and that's what we're in. I do believe that we should put the money in this budget. We can put a fence around it or whatever we need to put around it, and say if the legislation doesn't pass and the money isn't going to be spent. But I think if we don't do that, and if we pass the legislation, which I think is something that is, we need the conversation, we probably need the person as well, then I think that for us to come back in a couple of weeks puts everybody in a difficult position. So I believe we should approve this money with the caveat that if it doesn't pass, you don't spend it, and so that we can move on.
All right, well, so I believe that Councilmember Katz and I feel this way. Councilmember Friedson, are you on board with that approach, or not? That's fine.
In the interest of, given how I've spent my day to day and the perspective that it has helped to bring me, I will go along with colleagues. I do appreciate the general goal here. I am a little concerned with the process. I will say I think the issues are much deeper than identifying an individual position. And so I would hope that while this is part of that effort, that this not be thought of as the solution to the problem, because I do think that the problem is much broader and much deeper, and we need to address that in a much bigger way. I spending a lot of time with Ms. Kasiri on this and other issues. I know your commitment to that and your breadth of experience in a lot of different areas, and so I just wanted to note that, but I will go along with colleagues in the interest of the beginning of our more collaborative and better communications approach between the executive and the council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson. All right, so without objection, we will adopt the recommendation with the caveat that also, obviously, whatever happens with the bill, I guess, Ms. Michelson, you will also track that for us as well, since so many things are happening at once. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Okay, so now we're going to move on to item 6, which is the council office. And for that, we have, of course, Ms. Michelson and I see Ms. Marin, as well as Ms. Brockington from the executive side. Just turn it over to you, Ms. Michelson, so you can walk us through. Oh, Ms. Healy is here too. You can walk us through the budget request and just observations regarding some of the areas of need that you have highlighted, which I will say right off the bat are areas of need that the council members have been discussing actively for a very long time. So I think it's important to note that even though you're bringing these forward, these are absolutely based on what you have heard council members express through some of our retreats, as well as some other conversations, things that we have identified as areas of need, because precisely how quickly and how complex the needs have become, how, just the in real time nature of our work, meaning that in terms of communicating, responding to our constituents, the depth and the complexity of the issues have really grown exponentially. And so in order for a county council that pretty soon will have 11 members, but that is responsible for what will most likely be a $6.4 billion budget approval oversight, all the land use decisions, all the legislation, we need to be true to what is necessary for this body, this institution, to be effective in not only carrying out our work, but also how we engage and how we communicate with our constituents. And, I'll say this because I've been here for a while. The voices that we hear are not necessarily always representative of the entire county voices, but I always found it so interesting when I hear people say, what do the council members do? And this is like a part-time thing. And, and just FYI for anybody that is planning on running for the county council, it is not a part-time thing. It is more than a full-time thing. And it's kind of 24/7. And it is, interesting in all the different ways that you will be asked about issues. And if you do not respond right away, the kind of criticism that comes at you is significant. And to that, I will only add that once again, the fact that we do represent a constituency that is so diverse means that many of us have to do all of this work in different languages with different cultural aspects to it, etc. So it is the most wonderful job ever. It is an awesome honor. But at the same time, it has a extremely increasingly complex demand that our central staff always steps up to the plate, but by no means do I believe we have the capacity in our communications office as well, including our own personal offices. So I wanted to just set the stage because I think what Ms. Michelson has put into her request, in my opinion, is it's a step forward, but no means it's what many of us believe we should have. But we understand that we are dealing with some, fiscal constraints. And so I just want to, thank all of you. Thank you, Ms. Michelson, for listening and for making sure that you advocate for what is needed. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Right. I want to start out by first thanking Ms. Brockington Sally, who's stepping in for some of her colleagues on numerous budgets today. And also to thank Ms. Marin, who is our HR liaison and lead and is responsible for really putting together and tracking our council budget throughout the year. And she does a fabulous job. So I want to thank her so much for all her efforts on our behalf. So we're doing this in two parts. First, the council office budget, then the communications NDA. For the council office budget, this itself, the recommended budget that came from the county executive is a very small increase of less than 1.4%, under $200,000, keeping the organization pretty flat. And we did have the opportunity to do a final check-in and learned through some of the tracking that our IT organization has done, that there has been a phenomenal increase in the amount of constituent services council members are providing. And I probably don't need to tell this to you because you're experiencing it, but just tracking correspondence coming in alone, a six-fold increase from 2011 to 2020. It's just been really amazing. So what we've suggested, given current fiscal situations, is a modest $40,000 increase to each council member's office, probably the equivalent of getting a part-time staff or maybe taking an existing part-time staff member, making them full-time. So it's not even enough for a full position, But we do think that it's really critical to provide some additional support for these offices. You know, I've spoken to your staff. They're all really overworked, and this pandemic has made that even worse. And hopefully this will provide a little bit of assistance there. The second increase I'm recommending is that the council offices undertook the initiation of some equity and inclusion training. We took a first step limited just to the council offices. This is a first step and one we think we need to continue over the next year, also with the intent of expanding it to the rest of the legislative branch. And I will note that the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice has its own training, but we believe these are they have different focuses. Nonetheless, we will work with them to make sure that it is coordinated. And this is a contractual effort. I will note also that I think it's really critical, given that we're going to have a turnover in council, for us to come up with a strategy on how we are going to continue to provide this training to new council members and their staffs as well, hopefully by that point on an in-house basis. But we want to position ourselves to be able to make that transition as successful as possible. So those are the two recommendations for the council office budget.
Great. Any comments from my colleagues? Councilmember Katz?
I know, just a very quick thank you to you. You said it all, Chair. But just a quick thank you to Ms. Michelson and everyone else who worked on this budget. I have to tell you, I think of all the emails I get more from Sandra Marin than anybody else. I mean, she has to work, and 24/7 is not, I always tease people they work 25/8. You have to work 25/9. I mean, it is constant that we get them. They're on time. They're always, I mean, you're obviously do a wonderful job. So we sincerely thank you. And I think all of this is very necessary. One of the things that COVID showed us is that we all need to continue to work 25/8. We need to have as many, we need as much assistance as we can possibly get. So I think this is a sensible, realistic way to approach this. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other comments. So without objection, I think that we will approve this recommended budget. And again, expressing our utmost appreciation to staff who's had to deal with, personal health issues, family related issues, while helping all of us do our work to respond to the many issues that this pandemic has brought. I don't think that there is a way to quantify the impact, the stress, the trauma, the added emotional and mental burden on our staff. And by that, I also want to, make sure that I'm talking about our central office staff, our administrative assistants, everybody, as well as our council office staff. But, we do this because we care about the work, we care about public service, we care about making sure that we do everything possible for our constituents, our residents. And, as we're a little bit, I think, celebratory, a little bit confident in the numbers that we are seeing coming out of, the daily reports on cases and things of that nature, and the number of vaccines, to the percentage of the residents that have received at least their first dose, et cetera. A lot of that is thanks to everyone banding together and putting forth their best possible self. So I just sincerely appreciate it, because I know how tough it's been. So thank you all. Okay, so with that, let's move right on to the item 7, which is the Legislative Branch Communications NDA. And for this item, of course, we have Ms. Healy, who has been extraordinary in leading us through this pandemic in terms of communication responses, just about everything, because this pandemic has been, in my opinion, predicated on making sure that we have the appropriate communication in place, that it's clear and that people know exactly what is happening. And she has led her team through amazing and very difficult times. So Ms. Healy, I very much thank you for everything that you have done to keep us straight and keep our county residents informed, and that has not been an easy task. And of course, Ms. Marin is here as well, and Ms. Brockington continues to be here also. I just wanted to also very quickly point out that this NDA, and I've asked my staff to make sure that we include this in the packet that goes to full council, because it's important to understand the history here. This has been really a work in progress. And it was 2011 when we started working on establishing some enhancements to our communications office. It began then with a part-time contractual position for Spanish language communication. In 2012, that was expanded to 2/3 position. In 2013, then we decided to strengthen a lot of this, and we created a full-time council, bilingual, bicultural, PIO, and the Council Communications Office. We also invested in a weekly council Spanish language program in radio, which was Radio America. We started the closed captioning during council hearings so that if we had residents that came to testify in a different language than English, that there would be subtitles on the screens in English. This is 2013 that we're talking about. 2014, we expanded some of that to include part-time contract support for outreach efforts with the Korean, Chinese, and Vietnamese communities. Also, we recruited 3 part-time contractors to strengthen communications outreach, a video editor, videographer, a second multilingual specialist to expand the outreach to our Korean, Chinese, and Vietnamese communities. In 2015, we also began to do some work with Línea Directa, which is a program that shows on Telemundo, and also with CCM in terms of related county issues. And so this again goes way back. And I'm a big believer in not reinventing the wheel. In 2008 is when MCPS established the translation unit. And that was something that I was very involved in and have been working on for a while. But the reason I mention all of this is because these kinds of systemic and structural changes are so necessary. We just had that conversation with the executive item on their translation unit. It is so critical that the council also enhance their capacity because our work, it is very unique in many ways. And it is not easy to be able to communicate with, your average resident that maybe does watch this, and pays attention to what we're doing. But imagine all of the residents that are not always watching what we're doing, that are not necessarily, involved and engaged. It is our job to constantly meet all of our residents where they are. And I, once again, will say that when it comes to serving our very diverse communities, this is pivotal. I mean, we're making decisions that affect their lives, and to not have the capacity to be able to respond, to be able to, inform, to be able to give sometimes life-saving information, in my opinion, means that we're falling short of our duty. So I know that there's a set of recommendations here that I believe literally just continues to expand in a very conservative fashion what we all started back in 2012. This pandemic, once again, has arrived to give us a very, very startling wake-up call regarding what our service delivery models and our best practices, what that should look like. And I will also be, very blunt. I have problems whenever we seem to vacillate when it comes to investing, especially in reaching our immigrant communities or our communities of color, as if we're still dealing with these communities like they just got here, we just discovered that they are here. If MCPS demographics and Montgomery College demographic is any illustration of what the 20 census is going to show, 73% of color MCPS, 78% of color Montgomery College students, then we need to own the fact that we are way behind when it comes to serving what is obviously the majority of our county residents. And so to me, strengthening these areas should not even be a question. As a matter of fact, I believe that we've been very slow at doing it. I understand that we have to be fiscally, responsible in many ways, but I think that this particular proposal, it's going to really help a council that in 2022 will expand and will require even more, of these types of systemic and structural responses. So again, thanks to the team who's done extraordinary work. And I also have to thank our council staff, because I know in my office, Berta Sersosimo, I know that in many other offices, they will drop whatever they need to drop in order to fill in the gap. But you know what? That's not their job, because then they also have to do constituent services for the office and things like that. They should not have to do what should be central, office work. But they've done it, and they do it because, once again, they love their job and they feel very strongly. So I have to give them all a shout out for having stepped up along with everybody else. So with that, I don't know if it's Ms. Healy and Ms. Michelson that wants to walk us through some of the proposals, and then of course we'll open it up to my colleagues for questions, and then we will take a vote.
Great.
Thank
you. I'll lead off and ask Ms. Healy to jump in at any point if there's something she wants to add. The executive's recommended budget for the legislative branch communications outreach NDA is close to 1.2 million. And we are recommending that the council consider certain additions to this budget at this time. They're all revolving around multicultural communications and also crisis management. And if you'll allow me to tell you a quick story, when I started at the council, we had Wang computers, and there was one computer per 2 analysts. It was on a cart, and we'd wheel it back and forth to each other when we wanted to use it, which was kind of ridiculous. At that time, all of the technology services was focused in the executive branch. We had one person here monitoring our servers, but not providing any support. And over time, we realized that not only did everyone need their own personal computer, but the council really needed its own IT unit to guide it here as well. And we've got a fabulous group of individuals working on IT issues for us. I think a little bit about that when I thought about how we've dealt with outreach and multicultural outreach in particular, that at one point it was centralized in the executive branch. But this has become such a critical part of what we do that saying that it should only be in the executive branch is not serving us well. And we feel that we need to expand the council's capacity to do that. The other thing I wanted to notice is we have been doing multicultural communication, but the way we've been doing it is borrowing time from people who have other job descriptions. So we do have a multicultural communication team. The members all have other jobs. No one is thinking about that 100%. It's hard to be strategic. It's hard to have a good plan. Similarly, on translation, we don't have in-house translation capacity. So as the chair noted, we have been fortunate that staff working in her office and other offices have stepped up to do that. And it is really not fair to them. There are some translation capacities in the executive branch. We found that to be, slow, not responsive, problems with quality. And we think that the best way to deal with that would be to have an in-house translator who could help turn things around and ensure that quality control. So we are recommending a multicultural communications and community outreach manager, someone who will develop a strategic plan for this and will, we very well could come back to you and say, we need more resources to do this, but we think the first step is to be strategic, have someone full-time doing this, develop a plan, including how we will interact with executive staff working on this. the other really critical position here that I've mentioned is having a full-time translator and interpreter so that we don't have to draw from other offices. Two other things that we think are important, maybe a little bit less critical, is to have a bilingual videographer who can work with our staff that's developing Spanish language videos, and to have somebody working with her on a contractual basis who can speak Spanish. And then finally, software solutions so that we can broadcast council meetings in multiple languages. We started investigating what is on the market, the easy options, the Google Translate. And we're just not convinced that that's the best tool. So we'd really like to look at whether there are better options. It would be really wonderful if every time the council broadcasts, people would have a choice of having translation into multiple languages. And we don't quite know the amount, so we're suggesting a $30,000 placeholder, which would let us investigate this and do that, and figure out how we move ahead. Finally, moving to the other area where we think that some additional consulting services would be helpful is in the area of crisis management. And we feel like there's been a 24-hour news cycle here. It doesn't stop. A lot of times we have crises and we have to figure out how we can best communicate with our public to let them know what to do, what the county is doing, what the next steps are. This has put an enormous burden on our communications office to try to do this. And I really think it has overburdened them. So bringing in some consulting assistance really focused on this sort of crisis management issue, I think would serve our residents well, would serve the council well, and would keep Ms. Healy from deciding she really needs to quit her job, and that's my biggest, goal here, is to make sure that we're not wearing her out so much that she decides she can't take it anymore, because I don't know what we would do without her. So these are the areas where I feel that we have real gaps in our needs, and are making these recommendations to strengthen what we do. I will note on the crisis management, since so much of that is linked to what we've been doing during the pandemic, that the committee may want to consider whether that's an ARPA funding, which would just be a temporary time period to get us through the crisis. And then we would have to reassess at the end of that whether the assistance provided on crisis management was so critical that it should be done on an ongoing basis rather than just temporarily as we hopefully wrap up our dealing with pandemic issues. So I'll stop there. And Ms. Healy, do you have anything you wanted to add before we turn it over to questions?
I just wanted to make a few comments. And the first is being, the chairwoman hit it right on the head. And I really want to express my appreciation to you, Chair Navarro, because you were the original architect of a holistic communications model at the council, which has been able for us to do this work and to support us year after year. And I greatly appreciate that, as well as the support from everyone on the committee. This entire year, you've all pitched in to help us. You've given of your staff, you've given of yourselves to get us through this crisis this year. And I also want to recognize the members of our team, because it's been a total group effort. Everyone on the communication staff stepped up to the plate, did what they need to do outside of their comfort zone and outside of normal working hours, and never complained and jumped in and did it. So I really want to recognize every member of my team who's done an amazing job. And it's been because of your leadership that we've been able to put this team together and to really step it up this year. So I just want to express my appreciation to all of you and to my team.
Thank you, Ms. Healy. I also, again, you've been a great leader. And the only thing I will say before I turn to my colleagues is that I don't view, this investment as sort of like only for, it's not about working in silos again, right? So it should be kind of interwoven in everything that we do, so that if we are going to be engaged in a land use decision about a master plan and we're out there in the community, that this is integrated. If we are going to have a town hall, for example, that all of this support is integrated so that when we're doing our communication, our engagement, our outreach, we're not trying to separate it as if, this is what we'll do with Spanish speaking people, or this is, no, that is all part of this integrated approach, and that everybody can feel like, doesn't matter how maybe intimidating it might be to try to, get involved and participate, because, hey, we have made it so that you can feel comfortable and that you can find the information and that you can find the engagement to be productive. And that's what we're trying to do. So sometimes I feel like we get stuck on thinking that this is only multicultural, and it really is just interwoven in everything that we do. So anyway, let's see, Councilmember Katz.
Thank you. And, I think I was up to 26.9 for Sandra Marin. I think, Sonia, you and your group are like 27.10 or 11, something like that. You really are unbelievable. And I do want to echo what Marlene said. If you get so frustrated that you think that today is not the day for you, let us all know. You communicate well, let us all know, and we'll figure out something here. I mean, all days are not horrible. It's just that we have to figure out how to make them better. But I agree. I think we need to enhance the way it's being suggested. And I also agree with the chair. I know I'm getting a feedback. I don't know if others are getting it, but I also agree with the chair that this is a system that needs, I always like to talk about the puzzle. The puzzle needs to fit together. Communication is a puzzle, and it needs to fit together so that every person who we are trying to reach gets the information that we know is so very necessary for each person to get. And you all do a wonderful job, and we need to give you the resources to continue to do that wonderful job, even in a more enhanced way. So thank you very, very much, and I appreciate all the staff suggestions.
Thank you. Councilor Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, just echoing comments that have been made. Thank you to the staff. This has been an unprecedented year. We've been asked to do things in county government and at the county council that nobody would have anticipated. The other duties as assigned category has far surpassed what anybody signed up for, what anybody has in their job description. And we owe everybody a debt of gratitude. I mean, this really has been the essence of servants in public service. And I really do appreciate that. There are no more hours to work. I don't do math as well as Councilmember Katz does, so I won't attempt to dictate the way that days and hours work. That is beyond my mere mortality. But it has created a challenge, and the stress that has created, the challenges that has created, it makes it harder for us to do our jobs, which is to serve the community. And so appreciate that. I will echo the comments about Chair Navarro and your efforts. I will say that early on in the pandemic, this was an issue that you raised in the very first briefing that we had, and continued to raise this challenge. It's not really a council issue, although we are definitely a part of it. We've been talking about the capacity of the legislative branch of a government of our size and scope for a while. But in terms of our outreach and the way that our government communicates with its residents, and the type of residents we have, and the type of communication that they require, and the amount of cultural competency and language proficiency that we are capable of doing at every level of government, legislative, executive, and beyond. And it hasn't caught up to the population that we are tasked with serving. I take very seriously this role. These are not our seats. These are the seats that belong to the public, that we have the privilege and honor of very temporarily occupying for 4, 8, or 12 years. And I think that that's really important. And certainly in the 4, 8, and 12 years that each of us are approaching to serve, and only Councilmember Navarro will be able to say more than 12 years in the history of the county council. But the county has changed and will continue to change. And so I really do appreciate that leadership that has been shown. So I am very supportive of all of the efforts included in here to address the cultural competency, language proficiency, and the type of outreach that we need to have to communicate the issues that we are working on and to hear from the residents who they impact, and in many cases impact the most. And so I'm very supportive of that. I think that it's an investment that's worth doing. I will say that it's very important that we understand how it works together with what the executive branch is or isn't doing. I think we have found some real gaps in these efforts, and I just want to make sure that we're not, moving forward in a way that addresses the current gaps and aren't focused on the broader needs and are not focused on this current council or this current executive or this current moment, but are really thought through strategically and comprehensively as a county council that is changing in terms of what the expectations of our residents are, and a population that is changing based on what its composition and what its needs are. And I just, I don't think we're there yet. I think this is in the early stages. You have to provide the funding before you can ensure that it is being put to use in the best possible way. But I just wanted to put that marker down. This committee in particular, Chair Navarro especially, have really focused on being strategic, being comprehensive, connecting the dots. We've been talking quite a bit about that in other areas. And so, hopefully when this is better fleshed out, after the budget process, we could really, get a briefing on specifically how this is going to work, how the issues that we dealt with earlier in the executive branch and filling some of those gaps are working together with these. I don't think that one in one direction and the other in another direction with the siloed approach that I was listening in on Councilmember Navarro, Chair Navarro noting earlier, will work. And I think particularly here, county residents, as Councilmember Katz was talking about, don't care who the branch of government is that is responding to them. It's the county government. It's the folks who are, whose salaries they're paying to provide them with services that they need. And so I just hope that we can address that. The only thing that I will say is I think on the crisis communications piece, at least for me, I think my sense is that's a little premature for me. I think by the time we put together the crisis communications proposal, we will be through this crisis. And I think it may make sense to really think through what that means. I mean, I have previously run a communications office at a large state agency as part of my role. Crisis communications was certainly central to that job, but thinking through having the consultant be providing training and other things to individual council members, I just am a little uneasy about that. I think the whole challenge that we have in crisis communications is eliminating the silo, is making sure that we're speaking with one voice as a county government. I think that has been a challenge for us throughout this pandemic, as a council, as an executive branch, individual departments. I think we got to sort through some of that once we get a chance to catch our breath and then think through how to move forward, at least from my perspective. I also do think that as we work out some of these other issues, it will free us up to better address the crisis in the moment. I think, some of it is, as we were talking about, when you're repurposing folks from doing their standard job to have to do other jobs, it doesn't allow for the type of strategic thought and proactive efforts that we all would hope. So I'll just leave it that where I'm at personally is I am very comfortable, very happy, and feel very strongly about building on the work that has been done in terms of outreach and representing the changing community that we have and the new needs that we face. But on the crisis communications RFP, at least from my personal perspective, I think we're not quite ready for that, although I do think that it's something that should be discussed and we should work through it, although I don't think that it's a council issue. I think that is a county government question, and we ought to have, as part of the long-term strategic conversation, a decision of, how that's done, where it's done, what's the best way to move forward on that. So that's my general thinking there. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson. Listening to you, it occurs to me that perhaps one of the areas that we should be looking at is the area of professional development for our communications team in the subject of, crisis management, communication, or things of that nature. So that, instead of focusing on contracting, because as you were saying, I feel like we're kind of like, hopefully, nearing the other end. But I do believe that there are particular nuances and just general practices that go with crisis management, which I feel like we literally are doing crisis management every day. I mean, every day there is something that comes up that is broader than just, of course, the pandemic. So I don't know. I feel like maybe we can think about how we could address that piece and then just strengthen the capacity of our communications office to have almost like a set of protocols and guidelines vis-a-vis how you manage particular crises that affect us generally. What is it that we can discuss? How quick? What are sort of the protocols in place? I don't know, if it's something that we can then come back to with, additional dollars, et cetera, because I know that, as Michelson, you had said that the crisis management RFP, you were thinking maybe it could be through ARPA, but that would be something broader. So I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on, how we could strengthen that. But it occurs to me that I think that the area of professional development is one that we need to pay a little bit more close attention, to. So it's not just hiring folks, but then also prepping everybody with the tools to meet this ongoing, rapidly changing landscape of communications. Just a thought there, Ms. Michelson. Don't know if you have any.
I do think that particularly, if we bring in a multicultural manager, which kind of frees other staff people's time, that what we can do is, as you suggested, Chair Navarro, look at training options. And try and see what we can do with the existing staff to give them additional capacity to do this without going a contractual route, but doing professional development. And then, if that doesn't seem to be enough, we'll come back to you and let you know.
Okay, does that sound satisfactory to colleagues, Councilmember Friedson?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great idea. And I do think that, ultimately we need to be in a position to respond to crises. In fact, we're seeing them more and more, as you noted, and maybe it's not going to be a global pandemic, we hope, for at least another century. But there will be more and more crises that we need to develop. And I do think training the team and equipping the team to do that, and putting them in a position to succeed by having the appropriate staff complement on the executive branch and the legislative branch. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'd be more comfortable with that approach. I think the consultancy here is the area where, maybe during a global pandemic, that's an appropriate thing to do. But once we get out of that, I wasn't sure that was the right approach, although I appreciated the thought process. I think what you have suggested here of, thinking through, and I think we'll have time to do it. To your point, we all hope that, once we get out of this pandemic, we want to be thinking through, like you and Councilmember Katz had raised, in case we have another issue, so that we are prepared in advance for it. And I think having staff prepared for it and having a team ready for it is a better long-term approach than hiring a consultant with a roadmap to help the council members. Because again, we're temporary, and I think we should treat it as, each of us as a council member is only here for a temporary period of time. It's creating and developing a professional network of a team and a staff that really allows it so that the institution can serve the community and the council members are frankly come and go. And so I think it's a really good suggestion. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the last thing I will say, also to you, Councilor Friedson, I know in the previous items when we were discussing, 311 and the community partnerships and things like that, we did say that we're going to come back to have a fuller conversation about how all of this aligns, right? So all this money that we're investing in outreach and communications, et cetera, both on the county executive side, but also as we're strengthening, the councils, I would like to have a robust session to discuss almost like, rules of engagement. How are we going to leverage, our capacities? How can we work together? Can you please give us information that is timely? All of these things. I at the end of the day, as you were saying, people think of one county government. The bottom line is that we have got to make sure that we're understanding how everything is interacting. And I know Dr. Torrega said that, he had identified some really good sort of next steps. And so Ms. Michelson, I think that, for central staff, I think if we could schedule something perhaps maybe in the middle of summer, just to kind of bring, MC 311 community, the community partnerships, all of these efforts together, the PIO, to have kind of like a roadmap for establishing rules of engagement. Because the last thing we want is what we did experience, especially during the crises, where we wouldn't have accurate information or timely information, or no, that's your job to translate. No, that's your job to translate. And, we can't do that. It's absolutely ridiculous. So anyway, I think that it would be awesome if we could do something of that nature.
I have to mention in my earlier comments, Madam Chair, that I hope that we have more council members who are capable of doing translations moving forward, but I hope that we don't need council members to do translations moving forward, because I know you have spent more time than should have occurred translating press releases and other official documents of the government. We're lucky to have that, and I hope we have more of it moving forward for a lot of different reasons. But certainly we should have a government that's set up where council members are not being asked or being in a position where they need to do that. So I think this is a step forward to avoiding that. And thanks for stepping in where the gap occurred during the crisis.
No, I mean, it of course, I feel like it's my responsibility, but I am sensitive to the notion that it's not sustainable. Mm-hmm. And, we all do what we need to do. But yeah, it is about structures and it is about, the institution. And as you said, we're just here temporarily. So whatever we can do to strengthen that, I think it's the way to go. Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is that we will adopt without objection the county executive's recommendation of the 1,080,342. And in addition, we will then, Ms. Michelson, I guess you can help me out here of like where is this going to go.
The bottom of page 2 of the memo lists the different additions: the multicultural communications and community outreach manager, bilingual videographer contractor, software solutions and equipment for broadcasting in multiple languages, and a full-time translator. And we will hold on the crisis management consulting firm, but look for opportunities for professional development that could strengthen our staff.
I think that sounds about right. Without objection? Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Okay, so moving right along, item 8. Let me go back to my notes. Okay. Item 8. I did move to a different area of the house so that the doggies wouldn't follow me, but they did. So I apologize if you can hear.
Madam Chair, it didn't work.
It didn't work at all. It didn't, because my daughter had to go out, and so he's very small. He's only 4 pounds, but he's very loud. Our public elections fund, we are coming back to this item. And one of the things that we wanted to sort out before taking final action on this item was the issue of the staff, the positions that would be dedicated to this particular piece, because of course, as you recall, we had a lot of conversation about, we had the trial run of this program. It was very successful, but it was also very taxing on Mr. Crow and everybody who was trying to figure out a lot of the questions and get the answers. And so one of the things we did was to come back, elicit feedback from people who had participated, et cetera. And there were surveys, there was just a lot of robust feedback. And one of the things we did was to amend the bill. And one of the things it asked for is that the county executive should either hire positions or designate a position that would be dedicated to troubleshooting and to giving the appropriate information, et cetera, provide guidance, because it can be really stressful when you're trying to figure all of this out. And so we didn't have clarity when we took this item up the first time, but we're back. And Mr. Mia, why don't you take it away and tell us what was the resolution for this, and then we can quickly take a vote.
So since we last met, the CAO agreed to send over a budget amendment, which actually arrived a few minutes ago. And what it does is it's requesting 1.5 FTEs to be added to the Office of Consumer Protection to 1 FTE for a grade 23 program manager position to serve as the full-time public liaison position. And it would also add another half FTE to it would fully fund a currently vacant part-time administrative specialist position in OCP. And 2, it would convert it to a full-time position to provide additional support to the public liaison position. Because there's a need for the public liaison position today, department has agreed to name a temporary public liaison who would begin to fulfill that function today and would begin to transition knowledge from Mr. David Crow on the program. And so just to note that the Public Safety Committee last week did vote by consent on the consumer protection budget. It did not get a chance to review these changes, but the full council will have a chance to review and do a straw vote on the 17th on OCP's budget. So this is fairly late breaking information, but this is the plan that the executive has proposed, and council staff does support this plan. I will also note that the CE's budget for March 15th originally included $250,000 for finance for contractor support. Because of these new resources being added to OCP's budget, that request has been revised down to $150,000, primarily for a admin support person to help Mr. Crow administer the funds, track and monitor disbursements, track receipts, and interface with the state IT systems. And there's also some dollars in $150,000 for a potential IT license or IT support that may be needed, but it's not known, it's not confirmed if that's needed yet. Also, so those are the staffing pieces related to the elections fund. I will stop there and answer any questions, and department staff is available to provide more details.
So how would this be communicated to candidates, et cetera, in terms of like, who is the, who's the staff person? How do they contact the person? All of those details. How would that be communicated? Because I know people are already asking.
I believe there will be a press release once. I'm assuming it's official now that we're funding this. So I believe a press release will go out, and then we will have something on the program website, which will link over to OCP and have the contact information, and then develop it from there.
Great, because that would be critical. I know that's going to be the very first question people are going to start asking. So it'd be awesome to have that, once, of course, everything is approved. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. Could someone just explain to me the 1.5 positions? I didn't quite understand. There was a question of identifying a position in the county government. We didn't need to create a position for that based on the legislation, but there was an interest to do that, particularly when it was selected to put it in the Office of Consumer Protection. I think all of us were sensitive to an office that is asked to do a lot and is not provided a lot of resources to do it. Now, that wasn't our decision. That was the executive's decision. I respect and appreciate the sensitivity of, a unique circumstance that may not be so unique moving forward, which is an incumbent county executive participating in the program and wanting to have, some separation as appropriate for the liaison to a campaign for that particular county executive. So I understand that. I think that it was a reasonable approach, but I didn't quite understand going from part-time to full-time for an additional position plus the liaison. Are there going to be two people, somebody part-time working on the liaison work for this and somebody full-time working on the liaison work for this? Or am I not understanding what the proposal before us is?
So the proposal is there's currently a half FTE part-time admin specialist that's currently vacant and unfunded in OCP as of today. The proposal will be to reactivate that position and to make it a full-time position, so that part of the position's duties would support the public liaison and the remaining part would provide general admin support to OCP. And that position, I don't know, Dr. Friedman, how long that position's been vacant, but I believe that's a resource that's needed to assist the department.
Yes, that's a part-time position. So Councilmember Friedson, what this would be doing would be creating one new position and then turning a part-time position that's been vacant for a while into a full-time one, which would provide assistance to the new full-time position, but would also reflect the fact that this is to some extent seasonal work, so that the assistance may not be required full-time. And if I could also just introduce our manager, our operations manager, Samuel Buo, who's actually going to be, he's on the call now, of course, and he's also going to be carrying the weight of this work during the remainder of FY21. So what we will be doing is during the remainder of FY21, carrying this without any further resources, because the resources that were being discussed right now don't kick in until July 1. It's basically just one new position with a part-time assistant.
So I'm just, again, I totally appreciate it. Listen, if the question is, does the Office of Consumer Protection need more support? I would answer yes. I think that you have been stretched very thin and have taken the brunt of cuts and other things that have not come back to capacity. There's more fraud now with this pandemic, perhaps than ever before, and I think your call volume is, I'm sure, going up because we're getting a lot of the concerns and questions that we're forwarding to you. And I'm just one of 9 council members, and so I know that you're answering more phone calls than just mine, even though you're a neighbor of mine. So maybe and I get to be your council member, Mr. Friedman. So, I just want to make sure my thought of a liaison position is that the liaison would be receiving the phone calls and answering the emails themselves. And so I just want to make sure that there's not like an intake person and then, my idea is that there'd be a direct point of contact in the executive branch who can quickly, responsibly address questions and concerns. I just want to make sure that we're not creating a high level of bureaucracy here to be able to respond to campaign questions, which they need, sometimes pretty quick turnaround on. That's my only concern. If the issue is there's some administrative issues and the office already doesn't have the ability to handle them, fine. Let's deal with that. I think there's a lot of sympathy on this committee for the concerns of the office, and it's being stretched too thin. But I still don't quite understand the half position. There's no position now. You're being asked to add a position that is unrelated to your normal work, which you're taking on, and now we're going to fund the half position that is unfunded, and an additional half position.
There will be one new position, and that position will be the point of contact. There's no question about it. This is going to be the direct contact person. It's going to leave David Crow and finance able to do all the vetting and work that they are going to be responsible for doing. So there's no question about that. And we'll be very clear that the public, people running for office, can have one point of contact, as I think was the plan that the committee chair Navarro had envisioned when this was created. So regardless of what you call it, whether it's called a liaison, a gatekeeper, a point person, an ombudsman, a public-facing contact, we will have that. We'll have that in our office, and you can rest assured that customer service is the middle name of our office and has been that our middle name for the last 50 years. That we are soon to be celebrating our 50th anniversary at the end of this year, and it's probably fitting that this new responsibility is being added to our portfolio. And we will even be able to take this new responsibility on from day one, even though we're certainly not subject matter experts, but Samuel Buo, our operations manager, will be that person starting whenever the second is that this begins. And then we will be having someone come aboard by hopefully July 1 when the funding kicks in, and we will work on this role as best we can. And I think we understand, and the more clarity, the better, that comes from the committee in terms of what they're looking for. But I think we have a pretty good sense of what that is.
Thank you. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much. I think it should be pointed out that we have Mr. Friedman and Mr. Fried's son. So we have man and son on this call. So between them, we certainly will get all this straightened out. I have always said, Eric, and I mean this sincerely, and Mr. Buo, we appreciate all of your help as well, and everybody else from consumer protection. But I believe that we need to start advertising for this position, so when July 1, when the money is available, the person can actually start. Because as we know, and Mr. Buell, I don't know you well enough to tease you, but I like teasing everybody. You all have, and I would tease you to say you don't have enough to do, but I know you do. So, but candidly, this is not fair to have them do all of this extra work without having the extra help. So if it's possible, and I don't know the nuts and bolts of how you would do it, but I believe that we should approve this, and we should approve this saying that they get to advertise for this position and on July 1, and that the person could start that quickly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I echo that. I mean, so however, Mr. Mia, you can sort of relay this as well in terms of the intent of the committee. I also believe that, the kickoff of this program was very ambitious, and it just coincided with the fact that we had term limits, and we know what happened, right? 30-something people running, I think it was. I forgot how many, but a lot.
Yeah.
And I know Mr. Crow and Mr. The Mariners, everybody just really stepped up, but it was not easy. And it was, though, I think, super important, right? Other jurisdictions have emulated what we did here. And one of the things we understood was, yes, we're going to need more capacity to make sure that, everything goes to plan and that everybody has the information. And lo and behold, 2022, there'll be 2 additional seats, open seats. So who knows, how many people are going to actually run. And of course, there are going to be, 3 term limited council members. So therefore, we know we can anticipate that this is going to be a very active cycle. And so I feel pretty good about this proposal. I do believe that, yes, the minute, as soon as possible, these things need to get advertised. Really appreciate Mr. Buell stepping up to this plate. I'm sure Mr. Crow is going to be like, doing a little dance or something like that. But I'm sure he will be able to instruct you and orient you and all the nuts and bolts. I'll have to say that, I already have people that have asked me for information, and sending over links to website and the graphics that, were put together, who were really, the infographics were really useful. That's going to start happening as well. So anyhow, I feel comfortable with this proposal. And unless there's any objection from colleagues, I think that we should, go ahead and adopt this along with the recommendation of the executive for the $3 million. If everybody's kind of okay with that. Councilmember Friedson, he's sort of okay, but.
No objection. I was just trying.
Okay. All right. All right, Mr. Mia, you have the intent of the committee, the decision of the committee all figured out?
Yes, I do.
What we want? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Friedman, Mr. Crow, Mr. Boole, and Ms. Boronat de Gomez. Thank you so much for the information, and I'm glad we were able to sort it out. All right, our next item is property tax options rate amount and the income tax offset credit. And for that, we have Mr. Gene Smith, and we're just going to jump right into it, Mr. Smith. Turn it over to you.
All right, very good. Thank you, Ms. Navarro. And I'm also joined by my colleagues from Finance, Mr. Covio, Mr. Platt, and apologies, and Ms. Feldman. And welcome. So we'll go ahead and given the time, we'll be fairly quick. So each year the council considers its options as it relates to property taxes, including the income tax offset credit. As noted in this council staff report, due to the charter amendment that occurred in November 2020, the council's process is simplified this year. There's not a lot of different permutations that the council staff needed to do unless council members wanted to explore those, and none were going to explore it this year based on council president's approach to the fiscal 22 budget.
And we'll thank Councilmember Friedson for that. Thank you for simplifying things, Councilmember Friedson.
Indeed. And so the executive has made recommendations, council staff notes those, and we'll go through both of them real quick. So for the income tax offset credit, this is a credit that's provided to resident homeowners in the county to help offset certain income taxes each year. The tax credit has been at $692 since fiscal 11. The county executive's recommended budget continues to keep this at $692. This is one of the largest tax credit expenditures that the council approves. In fiscal 20, which is the latest data we have, more than 243,000 properties received this tax credit for a total of $168.5 million in assistance provided to resident homeowners. As also noted, the staff report came out prior to the public hearing for this item on May 4th. There was one testimony related to the homestead tax credit as well, tying that application process to the income tax offset credit. The council has received testimony similar to this before, and rather than getting too involved into it, council staff believes this is just an item that the council or the committee could take up at a later date, given how many properties it could impact in such a short manner. The homestead tax credit application is required by the state in order to receive that, but in order to receive the county's income tax offset credit, there is no application. It is automatically provided by SSTAT based on qualified properties. And Finance and SSTAT work every year to make sure that qualified properties are receiving it and not rental properties. Obviously, some could slip through the cracks, as Mr. Weiland has suggested, but given the number of properties that are not currently that have not applied for the homestead tax credit. In 2016, it was 96,000. There could be a significant number of properties that would lose this benefit. And so council staff just believes in all fairness to note what was said since it was not in the packet, but also believes we should just come back to this item rather than make a quick change in the middle of the process. Other item I'll note with the income tax offset credit is that the process will change moving forward should the council or the executive wish to change this tax credit. So now that the tax rate is the item that is the charter limit that the council will look at, any changes to this tax credit will result in changes to revenues that year. So in table 1 on page 3, council staff just provided some illustrative examples. Moving the tax credit down to $650 in fiscal 22 would result in almost $10 million of resources available to the council. Vice versa, if the council increased the tax credit to $750, it would need to find about $14 million in resources to provide that. So that is a very different process moving forward than what the council previously saw. And so with that, again, the executive has recommended $692 for this. The council will consider the GO committee's recommendation on May 17th and then approve the resolution later with the full omnibus resolutions they approve with tax for the fiscal 22 operating budget.
All right, let's see. Any comments from Mr. Covey or Mr. Platt? No? Mr. Covey? There you are. Oh, you just muted yourself, Mr. Covey. You need to unmute.
I'm
There you
sorry. I'm trying to do this using my hearing aids and my phone, but also looking at the computer. So sorry about that. Yes, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, it's an excellent packet to Mr. Smith. Thank you. I would note, as Mr. Smith noted, that tax credits are now a deduction or a reduction of revenues because of the change in the charter limit. And that is illustrated in Table 1. It's just not limited to the income tax offset credit. So if you were to enact a new tax credit, it's going to reduce revenues to the extent that it will reduce revenues, depending on what you do and how many residents it affects and the amount of the credit that you're giving. If you want to talk about using the homestead credit flag on the state file, we can do that. I agree with Jean that it's probably best left to after you're finished with the budget. It's probably too complicated to do right now while you're in the midst of it. I would argue, as I have in many times in the past, that it is a double-edged sword at best. A lot of Montgomery County homeowners do not sign up for the homestead tax credit through the state system because they know they're not eligible for the homestead credit. Remember, the homestead credit is the credit cap or assessment cap of 10% annually. And if your assessment isn't growing at close to 10% a year, then you're not eligible for the homestead credit. And frankly, for the last more than 10 years, the vast majority of homeowners have not been eligible for this. Homestead credits hit about 4,500 or so, 5,000 accounts, sometimes 4,000 accounts out of 340 something thousand accounts. And that's really all I'd like to say for now on that particular subject.
Thank you, Mr. Covey. I mean, I think we have discussed this before, but we definitely can come back to it. You know, since there are new council members as well. I think it was probably with the previous council and the previous council, but I think we can definitely come back to it in the summer to have a more robust conversation about this. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I definitely don't think now is a good time to dive into this. It's complicated. It only impacts a modest number. I do think it's worthwhile to discuss, and so I think putting the marker down that we're going to be discussing it after the budget, I think, is appropriate. So I appreciate it being noted here, and think that the comments seem reasonable to me, that it is a double-edged sword, like so much of this type of policy related to property taxes. Just a couple of items. One, thank the whole committee, thank the executive branch, thank everybody who was involved. This is a great packet, and I think it's partially because we have great staff, Mr. Smith, and also because residents stepped up and simplified our tax code and made it much easier and much more understandable, much more rational. It should be that a tax credit, when you add credits to people, it costs money. And when you take away credits that exist, it saves money, in terms of revenue projections. That is, in any rational tax system, that is how it would normally work. We now have a rational tax system. So now it is how it works. I do think that this is helpful. It's a significant step in a very positive direction. 30 years of tax policy changed now for the first time. I wish we weren't in a pandemic so we would fully appreciate and understand it a little bit better with all of the federal funding and all of the craziness. It really isn't able to be understood or highlighted in the way that it likely deserves, and the significant step forward that residents facilitated in overwhelming numbers. But hopefully at a later date we'll fully appreciate that. I did, in that vein, just wonder if there was any analysis, or there could be. It doesn't have to be for today, but of what the rate would have been under the previous charter limit regime, and what the amount of money. It's very hard to project moving forward, but we now do have the first case study of keeping the tax rate consistent year over year at 0.9785, and so we could look at what it would be based on the assessable base. So if that's available to generate, if it's not available now, which I imagine it likely isn't, I would appreciate that. I think it would be helpful for council members, and I think it'll be a productive part of this conversation as we move forward for everybody to understand as we think about revenue in the broader context and we think about the total budget. And there's a lot of other conversations that will be related. I think this will be helpful for us to have. So just wanted to request that. If it's available now, would love to see it. If it's not available now, would love that to be able to be developed at a time when staff is able to put that forward for us and for the public. And I just wanted to thank again colleagues for all the work that went into the change to the property taxes, and most importantly to residents who stepped up. I will point out that the Wall Street financial experts the next day said that Montgomery County's fiscal health was improved based on the decision made by residents. That's a significant positive step in a very good direction, and now we're ratifying the result of that vote for the first time. And so just wanted to make sure that I noted the fact that residents really stepped up here. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson, for making those comments. Perhaps this is not the most exciting thing that we all get to talk about, but it's absolutely what helps us be able to do so many more extraordinary things. Very critical component. And I think this team in general, always steps up and does the right thing. And so I'm also very grateful for that. All right, so Mr. Smith, can you summarize then the recommendations so we can vote?
Well, actually, if we want to do them both, I'll go ahead and go through the weighted rate real quick. We've already talked some about it. So the new charter limit is now the weighted rate that was the previous fiscal year. That's going to be 0.9785 per $100 of assessed value. That is what the county executive has recommended for this budget. All estimates, both for current properties, new construction, and personal property taxes at that rate, it'll generate roughly $1,884,000 million, or $1.8 billion worth of tax revenues for fiscal 22. One thing that council staff notes that under the new charter limit, that simple majority can approve the current rate or less than the rate. Obviously, if the council decides it wants to exceed the weighted rate, it would need all 9 votes, or all council members present. All council members would need to vote affirmatively for it. And the last thing I'll note, since I've had some questions about this, the weighted rate will not appear in the tax resolution that the council approves. The council approves multiple tax rates. It's the weighted rate comes together as one tax rate based on all of those combined. And so residents who are listening at home, or council members who are going to listen later, you will not see the weighted rate other than published in the budget. There will be multiple tax rates the council sets, and all of those will yield that weighted rate through the math that finance does every year. So with that, the GO committee should make its recommendations both for the ITOC, whether it should be different than 692, and the weighted rate, whether it should be different than 0.9785 per $100. If not, it'll just recommend the county executive's recommendation.
All right, colleagues, any objection to the county executive's recommendation here? All right, so we will adopt those 2 recommendations. Thank you, everybody. It's good seeing you, Mr. Covey and Mr. Platt. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our operating budget consent items. These are items that they're pretty straightforward in terms of the fact that there aren't, changes, controversial issues, etc. So we're going to move through them pretty quickly. We're going to start with the Department of Technology Services. I believe Mr. Torregas is the analyst for this piece. What I see here is that the county executive is requesting $44,642,174. That is 166.25 full-time equivalents, an increase of 3.02, and 1 full-time equivalent from FY21 numbers. Council staff has noted that there have been some adjustments that will have service impacts. An increase of $500,000 for FiberNet 2 maintenance to renew infrastructure, an increase of $557,072 for new software license costs for Varonis, Oracle, and NetMotion, and a decrease of $315,100 for the termination of 51 Monroe Street lease, which is no longer needed. So those are the adjustments contained in this recommendation. Dr. Torregas, anything you would like to add to that recommendation that you have included in your packet?
No, two quick things. Councilmember Friedson asked to explore the E-rate potential to offset some of the costs we have. And indeed, our Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions Department is looking into it. And the budget includes several initiatives in this area. The second one is that the TEBS, our new DTS, has now concluded a cloud readiness assessment, and I look forward to 2022 fiscal because we will be able to see migration of significant programs into the cloud, having concluded that assessment. With that, I recommend the approval.
All right, colleagues, any questions, any comments? Without objection, we will approve that county executive recommendation and county county council staff recommendation. Item 10B, device client management, NDA. In the packet, Mr. Torregas has included, the county executive is requesting $12,225,751, 31.7% increase from FY21. And that is for Microsoft annual license renewal, for improved replacement cycle for PCs and desktops, which are really important, and for new software license costs for Bomgar and Zoom. Obviously, a lot of adaptation because of the pandemic. So anything else, Dr. Torregas, regarding that item?
No, also to recognize the good work that Gail Roper and her staff have done in bringing Microsoft licensing back to the county in a robust manner. So now we have end-to-end protection, no matter where you start and where you end up, which we didn't have before in a robust manner. So it is an increase in the budget, but I totally support it and I would recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Torregas. And yes, I think Ms. Roper has done amazing work in the time that she's been with the county in really moving us forward. All right, any objection to this recommendation, colleagues? No objections, so we will approve that item. Item 10C is the Interagency Technology Policy and Coordination Committee, also known as ITPCC, non-departmental account, NDA, and it's a request of $3,000, which is the same as FY21. And this is a really dynamic group that for many years has looked at ways of leveraging resources and working on projects that really, I think, have become a model for us. And so very small amount that allows them to do, some of their work. And so let's see, Dr. Torregas, anything additional here?
Again, just very briefly, in July 1, 2021, you should expect to see recommendations for new leadership in ITPCC. As you remember, the ITPC is chaired by one of your 6 agencies, and the CIO subcommittee is chaired by the CIO of that same agency. So it's a 2-year rotating thing. Montgomery County government has had it for 2 terms, and it's now time to rotate it. So staff will be working hard to find the next excellent chair for that initiative. And the second thing is I just want to point out that the packet itself for measly $3,000 has very, very important information because each agency
has written out for the committee, for the council, and for the general public that downloads that package, all the work that they've done in terms of COVID and racial equity. It's a significant package, so I would urge you to spread it around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Any objection to the $3,000 request? Great. We will adopt that. 10D is telecommunications NDA, and the request is for $5,356,382. Dr. Torregas.
Again, very briefly, we're looking forward to perhaps losing our actual physical telephones and going to software-defined telephony and internet-based telephony very soon. So it's a level effort, and I recommend continuing the funding at the same level.
Any objection to this effort? All right, with that, it is unanimous. 10E, it's procurement, and for this, I believe we have Dr. Torregas and Mr. Mia. The request from the executive is $4,433,283. And this is a 2.8 increase from FY21, so very slight. Any additional comments on that item?
My quick contribution is that procurement has done an amazing job with limited resources in time of pandemic. They were able to step up and use technology extremely effectively since they couldn't come into work physically. In the fall, when your committee will have a chance, Ms. Navarro, to review performance, we look forward to hearing from that committee, from that procurement office, a status report on the center-led procurement strategy that was envisioned for 21 and suspended due to COVID. It's a new and dynamic process, and Mr. Shetty, I think, it has all the drive to bring some new models of procurement within departments, and you will want to hear from him in the fall.
Excellent. All right, any objection from my colleagues? We approve this recommendation. Next item is cable 10F. The executive is requesting $17,469,611, and this is a 5.8 increase from FY21. Dr. Torregas.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to inform the committee members that I received communication from Ms. Sue Present this morning at 10:40 a.m. Asking for this committee to pull the item and to have subsequent discussions because of concerns that she articulated that have to do with the ability or the excess fees or lack thereof that the county collects from industry. My own recommendation is to leave it in the consent calendar and to approve it, although I think Ms. President has some strong points that it is time to review the process of setting prices for tower review. And I suggest that given the fact that the Fed committee also has extensive dealings with tower siting and tower review pricing, that you organize a joint committee session between GO and Fed in the summer to take up the whole process of tower review and tower fee pricing. I don't think that also Ms. President, in her email to me, which I think was forwarded to Eurosys as well, made mention of the fact that this is using taxpayer dollars. In fact, the Tower Review Commission is in fact funded through cable revenues, and that's why I'm briefing you on this during the cable fund discussion. There are a couple of other issues on the cable fund that I wanted to just briefly highlight, but let me stop here and see if there are any questions.
I don't think we have questions, but I do think that we can come back to the item that you had described.
Great. The cable plan is a way for this committee and the full council to approve a manner of investing the franchise fees and other fees that the county collects. Those fees, because of cable cutting and other practices by the general public, have been declining over time. The time has come to take a long, hard look at the way that we fund items through the cable plan. The executive has made a decision to transfer $700,000 from the general fund and to make the balance. But I think you as a committee need to be informed of subsequent steps that may be taken in fiscal 22 to rebalance the cable plan. The cable plan is balanced today, and I support it and would recommend its adoption by you. The second very quick thing is that the Connect Montgomery Alliance has affirmed a strong focus on racial equity. You met with them a few weeks ago, and you asked them to do so. They also requested in that discussion a CMA coordinator, a Connect Montgomery Alliance coordinator, to help coordinate the activities of the various agencies. And OMB is looking into this and will be rebalancing or redirecting some of the existing funds in the cable plan with no changes to make that happen. Those are the only comments I have. I recommend the approval.
Okay, great. We'll come back to that item as well outside of budget. So without objection, colleagues, item 10F. 10G is the Office of Legislative Oversight. Mr. Seelar, the county executive, has included a request of $2,198,652. This is an 8.2 increase, and there's an increase of 1 FTE. And beforehand, just really want to thank you and your team, Mr. Seelar, for all your work. I think every single day we identify a new possible report from OLO that we need. So you're all very gracious and also very professional. And I think the public is very well served by your very in-depth analyses and support that you give us that helps further our legislative work. So major appreciation. Anything you would like to add to the recommendation?
The only thing I would say is the increase is just for the planning and social equity analyst that we are actually now in the process of hiring. That'll be conducting the analysis that was assigned to us by law last year. So the job announcement is up. So anybody who's watching who wants to apply.
Wonderful. That would be an important addition for our work. Okay, so let's see, without objection, colleagues, we accept the request from the executive. Item 10H is the independent audit, NDA, and the county executive is recommending $426,782.3% increase from FY21, 0.33 FTEs. Mr. Seelar.
Yeah, again, this is no change really over last year. This is the first year that we've gone with the new firm, the first full year, and we've been very happy. I think that they're doing a great job. So that's all I'll say about that. We possibly will have extra money. So if there are areas where you would like to do external audits that we could assign to this firm, that probably will exist this year. Costs came in a little bit lower than we thought they would last year.
Great, that sounds good. All right, any objection, colleagues? All right, hearing none, we adopt that item. And then the last item is 10I, Charter Review Commission, NDA, and this is a very big item of $1,150. Ms. Willens, anything you'd like to add regarding this very important item?
Oh, thank you so much, Madam Chair. And really don't have anything to add. Obviously happy to answer any questions. As you can see, this is not a change in the Charter Review Commission's budget. And to the extent they're watching, just, thank you to the Charter Review members. They are a very dedicated group. And as you know, they serve the council. It's a group of residents who are appointed by you to serve the council to provide recommendations on approving our county charter. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willens. And yes, thank you to the Charter Review Commission. They've been very busy and I think have worked really hard to put forth some really important changes to our charter. All right, colleagues, without objection. Okay, so we are, I think, ready to adjourn 15 minutes early, I think roughly 14 minutes early or something like that.
Wow. Maybe we should talk about that $1,000 a week.
little bit more.
Yeah.
All right, colleagues. Good work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We just finished our 19-item GO session. So kudos. Everybody deserves a cup of tea or something like that.
There you go.
All right.
Sounds
Take care.
good. Thank you all.